The Gay Agenda, 8 Strategic Principles. Previously, The Gay Agenda, a guiding manifesto for LGBT activism. Ever thought of how or why societal attitudes have shifted so much and so quickly? Was it a natural development, or was it there a game plan to change the way the world thinks? We introduce to you After the Ball, guiding manifesto for a new brand of pragmatic gay activism. A boldly original battle plan for conquering bigotry by exploiting the mass media. An agenda for change. What we have discovered is in fact an agenda of heterosexual thoughts and actions that we must somehow change. A list of beliefs and actions to change among straights. How will they do so? Strategy, persuasion, not invasion. Good propaganda. We have in mind a strategy as calculated and powerful, or if you prefer, manipulative. Gays must launch a large-scale campaign. We've called it the Waging Peace campaign, to reach straights through the mainstream media. We're talking about propaganda. Propaganda relies more upon emotional manipulation than upon logic, since its goal is to bring about a change in the public's feelings. In this episode, we introduce to you the strategic principles of LGBT activism. The strategy of waging peace, 8 practical principles for the persuasion of straights. Communicate. Appeal to the skeptics. Keep talking. Keep the message focused. Portray gays as victims. Give potential protectors a just cause. Make gays look good. Make victimizers look bad. Communicate. Public outreach requires careful communication. Win them over. Straights must be helped to believe that you and they speak the same language. You and they share enough ideas and values. Ever thought of why LGBT activists often use words like kindness, peace, equality, love, inclusion, hope, diversity, family? Same language. Do these words carry the same value and meaning? Communicate. Same language. What are your views on this strategy? Appeal to the skeptics. Ambivalent skeptics, our most promising target, may respond more favorably to conversion techniques. Assign different propaganda objectives to specific target segments of the population. Those more or less passively negative about homosexuality can be reached only by desensitization. Do you recall? Desensitization. Desensitize straights to gays and gayness. Inundate them in a continuous flood of gay-related advertising.
I'm gay.
I'm a cisgender lesbian.
And I'm bisexual.
And I identify as bisexual or pansexual.
I identify as a trans man.
I identify as queer, asexual.
Ambivalent positives, those already emotionally torn, may respond more favorably to jamming and conversion techniques. Jamming. Arouse in them feelings of shame for bigotry and a new protectiveness toward the gay community. Conversion. It entails actually making them like and accept homosexuals as a group. Expose them to an unending series of positive gay images.
We are ready to see more positive portrayals of the LGBTQ people in our mainstream media without censorship.
Appeal to the skeptics. Desensitize, jam, convert. What are your views on this strategy? Before we move to the third strategy, let's briefly look at the use of parallel strategies. Silence intransigence, mobilize friends. Do you recall this incident? In March 2021, a National University of Singapore student, Dana Teo, wrote an article published in Today Online. I myself am not particularly well versed in trans issues, trans rights, and the trans experience. But I can't even admit I'd like to know, because now even asking can be construed as disagreeing or being unsupportive of the cause and thus offensive. Her article led to a public backlash. A number of commentators were also particularly upset about Teo's comments about transgender people and related issues. Ever thought of why anyone who questions or disagrees with the LGBT stance gets silenced? Our primary objective is to cow and silence them. In favour of gay rights, intransigents will eventually be effectively silenced by both law and polite society. Ever thought of why LGBT friends are often agitated? As for our handful of friends, they must be agitated and mobilized for our cause, be emboldened to support our interests more aggressively. Silence intransigents and mobilize friends. What are your views on these strategies? Keep talking. Constant talk builds the impression that public opinion is at least divided on the subject. The main thing is to talk about gayness until the issue becomes thoroughly tiresome. Where we talk is critical. Visual media, television, films, magazines, and social media today are a gateway into the private world of straits through which a Trojan horse might be passed. The medium is the message of normalcy.
To normalize it, I'm still waiting for the day where you can see like a Mediacorp Channel 8 show where it's not like a love triangle with 2 guys and 1 girl, it's like a love triangle with 3 guys.
Ever thought of why LGBTQ representation in the media has been at record highs? Or why there has been a proliferation of LGBT accounts on social media? Success depends, as always, on flooding the media. Keep talking. Flood the media. What are your views on this strategy? Keep your message focused. When we say talk about homosexuality, we mean talk about gay rights issues and nothing more. Be single-minded. Be focused in your efforts to reach the public via mass media. So talk about gay rights and leave it as that. A brief recap. According to the Gay and Lesbian Medical Association, many men who have sex with men are at an increased risk of HIV. Problems with body image are more common among gay men, sexually transmitted diseases at a high rate, increased rates of anal cancers in gay men. Lesbians are more likely to have risk factors for breast cancers, chronic stress, smoking and obesity, higher risk for certain types of gynecological cancers, heavy drinking and binge drinking, use drugs more often. What are your views on LGBT activists downplaying the health risks associated with homosexual behavior and focusing only on gay rights? Ever thought of why there are hardly any public discourse and education on the logic, morality, or health risks associated with LGBT sexual practices? Why focus only on LGBT rights? We will unpack this further when we get to point 6, but for now, keep your message focused. LGBT rights. What are your views on this strategy? Portray gays as victims of circumstance and oppression, not as aggressive challengers. In any campaign to win over the public, gays must be portrayed as victims in need of protection. The gay community must deploy the special powers of the weak, including the play for sympathy and tolerance. Do you recall this incident on the 26th of January 2021, when 5 local LGBT activists broke the law and held a protest against transphobia outside the Ministry of Education?
A group of 5 of us went outside the Ministry of Education building to protest the fact that LGBTQ students are not treated fairly in schools. We have no resources given to support us. There is no policy to protect us and to affirm us. I went to a single-sex school, so knowing who I was made it really difficult to be like a full human being in an environment full of boys.
It's about saying all of your problems stem from this oppressive, systemically unjust culture that you grew up in. The problem is with all of these other people who haven't adopted the belief system yet. And if only all of these people would get on board with this, you know, we could have a utopia. But it's not about fixing yourself.
I had mental health issues. I think that's why I felt motivated to do this. If Singapore wants to make protesting illegal, you should be giving us proper and substantive alternatives to choose from.
The victim card. Blaming everyone other than themselves for the issues that they have. They twist their problems to be a result of your actions. Blaming you for their actions. For instance, pushing back against my assertions will cause me to self-harm. You're literally killing trans people.
The ideology of social justice, which taught me that my lack of success, my lack of happiness, my lack of security was not my fault, it was the world's. It's a very attractive mindset to someone who doesn't want to take accountability.
If you identify as a victim, then you're not responsible for your behavior. And that's troubling to me, it's frightening, because now all the accountability is on the people who hurt you.
Is this victim narrative accurate about others being the source of one's suffering? Do all LGBT people see themselves as victims?
My name is Tiara and I'm transgender. My outlet that I chose to showcase my femininity is school. I had the liberty to express myself freely. No one actually teased me for being trans, maybe because we live in a society that's more acceptable, that's more receptive to the idea of it.
I love to see myself in the video and to see comments which people said about me, like they call me like so-called and inspiration, especially I am different.
You always talk about reintegrating the transgender into society. We are all around you already, sorry. We got social worker, therapists, counselors, doctors, teachers who identify as transgender. So it's very easy. They all got the skill set. There's no challenges. It's very easy.
But it's hard to be gay in Singapore, right?
It's not hard.
Huh?
It's not hard.
You sure?
Yeah, it's not hard. A lot of service industry people are gay because they are great at what they do. The designers are gay. They're great at what they do. They're very creative people. Hairstylists, you name it. There's everywhere. There's a makeup artist. You name it.
Right now in Singapore, I'm recognized as one of Singapore's first few transgender models. I get a lot of jobs from brands who want to be inclusive.
Singaporean actor Stephen David Lim. You can live a fairly gay lifestyle without facing persecution in Singapore. Portray gays as victims of circumstance and oppression. What are your views on this strategy? Give potential protectors a just cause. The Waging Peace media campaign will reach straights on an emotional level, casting gays as society's victims and inviting straights to be their protectors. Our campaign should not demand explicit support for homosexual practices, but should instead take anti-discrimination as its theme. Do you recall that in August 2020, Amazon banned a book titled The Health Hazards of Homosexuality: What the Medical and Psychological Research Reveals? Amazon said the 600-page book was offensive. Ever thought of why a presentation on the health hazards of homosexual sex practices would be considered offensive and removed from the public eye, while a presentation of the health hazards of smoking cigarettes is a different story? Making gay okay. Homosexual acts are significantly more injurious to health than smoking. How is it that there can be warning labels on cigarettes, yet no cautionary admonitions regarding homosexual practices? An LGBT activist in the fight to legalize homosexual sex acts between men in Singapore.
Discrimination is discrimination, whatever you call it.
In the next episode, we will look at the laws LGBT activists seek to effect and how these laws could impact society. But for now, what counts as discrimination? How can we stop damaging discrimination? Does fighting discrimination mean all affirmation? Ever thought of why the popular narrative of homosexuality is hardly about homosexual behavior, but is almost always about discrimination, freedom, or equal rights? Homosexual behavior, the imagery of sex per se, should be downplayed. Emphasize the civil rights or discrimination side of things. Why downplay LGBT sexual behavior and focus on LGBT rights and discrimination? Few will be bold enough to defend homosexuality per se. Most would rather attach their awakened protective impulse to some principle of justice or law. Freedoms, rights, these should be the concerns brought to mind by our campaign. Give potential protectors a just cause. Anti-discrimination. What are your views on this strategy? Make gays look good. Strongly favourable images of gays must be set before the public. The campaign should paint gay men and lesbians as superior, veritable pillars of society. According to the Gay Times, representation for the LGBTQ+ community on television has never been better.
Yes, you should be very proud of yourself.
Thank you, Captain.
Every time someone steps up and says who they are, the world becomes a better, more interesting place. So, thank you.
Yes! Now this is how you make an entrance! Allow me to introduce myself. I am your fabulous godmother.
Douglas Murray, gay author of The Madness of Crowds, Gender, Race and Identity.
We have this sort of strange thing that, you know, to be heterosexual is to be rather disappointing, rather bland. Shame you have nothing to say for yourself. Unlike the magical fairy dust pixie gay people who sprinkle fabulousness and wondrousness everywhere they go, liven up an otherwise benighted heterosexual world. This is once again really the language of better, not of equal.
Ever thought of why LGBT activists in Singapore are pushing for positive portrayals of LGBT people in mainstream media? Make gays look good. Positive media portrayals. What are your views on this strategy? Make victimizers look bad. The best way to make homo hatred look bad is to vilify those who victimize gays. A campaign to vilify victimizers. For example, for several seconds, an unctuous beady-eyed southern preacher is shown pounding the pulpit against those perverted, abominable creatures. While his tirade continues over the soundtrack, the picture switches to heart-rending photos of badly beaten persons or of gays who look decent, harmless and likable. And then we cut back to the poisonous face of the preacher. The contrast speaks for itself. The effect is devastating. Ever thought of why there seems to be an ongoing strife between religious groups and the LGBT community? Why are religious groups often viewed as backward, not progressive, when it comes to LGBT issues? First, muddy the moral waters, that is, to undercut the rationalizations that justify religious bigotry, underlying anti-gay doctrine. Second, undermine the moral authority by portraying such institutions as antiquated backwaters, badly out of step with the times and with the latest findings of psychology. Make victimizers look bad, vilify. What are your views on this strategy? The strategy of waging peace, 8 practical principles for the persuasion of straights. The principles are known and the methods work. How have these 8 strategic principles influenced society's views on LGBT matters? Are these methods helpful or divisive for society? Love is love. Freedom to love. Ever thought of what love means in the LGBT movement? Bertrand Russell once asked, why is propaganda so much more successful when it stirs up hatred than when it tries to stir up friendly feelings? The answer is that the public is more eager to hate than to love. Well, love is an excellent end in itself, but it isn't half so compelling as a means. It is actually rage, not love, that lay behind all those progressive events. Ice-cold, controlled, directed rage. Rage, not love. What are your views on this approach? Will this strengthen or weaken Singapore society? Follow us on